Hey everyone, it's Aesah, and welcome to my guide for Academy Sentinel. I recorded a guide a few weeks ago for 6 Sentinel Heimer. This comp is pretty similar. In fact, you can definitely default to 6 Sentinel depending on what you hit. Um, Look at Diamond Plus. The Sentinel variation is actually represented the most, but if you go to GM Plus, you can see that it actually chooses to drop down to 4 Sentinels, which is honestly the variation that I would recommend learning as your default. Again, you can still flex into 6 Sentinels depending on what you're hitting. But the reason I like this variation is it can use both AD and AP items and carry Ezreal until you hit Jace. If you don't have Jace, you can see that Corki is even played like 50% of the time on this board as well. On endgame boards, a lot of times you might replace them with Jace. If you don't have Artillerists, Jace 1 is better than Ezreal 2. But basically, you'll want to play 4 Sentinels and then Academy backline. If you have itemized Ezreal, you can go Artillerist either with Tristana, or if you have Corki 2, you can carry Corki 2 as well. If you only have Corki 1, I'd rather keep items on Ezreal and then play Tristana to get that team-wide emissary buff, rather than just playing a Corki 1 with no items. I do want to talk about how Academy works. I think a lot of people don't understand how this trait works, honestly. Basically, all of your Academy units are going to get 5% health and damage amps. That's going to be the final line. Um, and then any Academy item you make, regardless of whether you get it from the trait, is going to give you extra stats. And that will give any unit extra stats, but the extra stats will be doubled on Academy units, which it's not incredibly high amount. As you can see, at 4 Academy, which is a pretty reasonable breakpoint, that's all you can get without an emblem or Jace. It's only 3% more HP and damage amp. So on an Academy unit, it's 6% more damage amp. It's not nothing, of course, like every little bit helps, but definitely don't go crazy building too many Academy items. For example, even if Guardbreaker is an Academy item, a build like Guardbreaker, DB Guardbreaker. Well, actually, DB might actually do more. I'm not entirely sure. But a build like Guardbreaker, Red Buff, even if Guardbreaker is an Academy item, this build is not going to be as good as Guardbreaker, Red Buff, Infinite. So definitely don't go crazy building too many of them. But just know that the Academy items are a little bit better. Whenever you have Academy items that can be used on multiple items like Guardbreaker, it can be good to have one on both your Ezreal and your Heimer. So you could go for a build like this. Obviously, you might not get these exact items. In fact, you're pretty likely to get these exact items. But in this case, both your Heimer and Ezreal will be getting a little bit of extra damage. Heartbreaker. Frontline, a similar story. Um, the items are a little bit better, but a lot of times you don't want to be building too many of them. For example, you have an Alawi 2, and one of the enemy items, Bramble Vest. You don't want to just build 3 of them. This is not going to be as effective as having a more normal, where you just might have something like Mormogs and a lot better. One thing to note with the Academy items is you want to plan for the future what items you're going to get. For example, if you know that, let's say you know that Bramble Vest is one of your Academy items, in that case, you would only want to build 2 tank items, because if you build 3 tank items, well then you're just going to have, let's say we build tank items, and then once we put in Academy, just have a leftover Bramble Vest that doesn't really go anywhere. It's not going to provide a lot of value. So it's very important to plan out your items ahead of time when playing. Another trap I think that you should not fall into is itemizing Leona. She does get the extra bonuses if she has Academy items, but Leona is actually, she's just kind of a weak unit. Even with Academy items, I would rather itemize Rel 2 or Loris 2. Either one of these are going to be better than Leona, even if you have a couple of Academy items. If you have 3 Academy items, I can maybe see Leona, but it's actually just quite a bit weaker. Um, yeah, opener. Obviously, if you have Lux, Sorcerer, Sentinel, uh, I've talked a lot about how Sorcerer Watcher is the strongest opener, but a lot of times you'll want to be holding like Irelia's because Irelia will go on your final board, giving Rebel with Ezreal and Alawi. So you will want to be playing Sentinels so you can get that Irelia too. If you pivot from Watchers kind of in the late game, you're kind of unlikely to ever have Irelia too. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but it does add up. So a lot of times you might play this from an opener like this. If you don't have Leona at first, obviously this. If you do get dropped in Ezreal on stage 1, I would definitely think about playing this line. Getting Ezreal, of course, is the hardest part. And then if you do get me online pretty early, this opener is just going to be really strong. Also note that this is 2 Rebel, so of course you could drop Zyra for another Rebel unit. Um, there's just a few, yeah, so there's some variations. The Emissary units are both going to be good. Nami or Tristana as like your level 6 slot. Again, it obviously doesn't have to be exactly this. It like 2 Sentinels on level 6. It doesn't have to be exactly Ezreal, like a Swain. And then like Rel will give you a little bit of econ boost with Conquer. But yeah, eventually you'll want to be itemizing for Heimer and then your AD carry. So your best in slot items, all the AD carries, it'll be Ezreal, Corki, or Jace, most likely. You can fit in some variations, but typically one of these 3. Infinity Edge is best on slot on all 3 of them. Uh, so Hurricane is really good on these 2, not that good on Jace. So these are some items you can look out for. Then eventually your AP carry is going to be Heimer. So Heimer, he really wants at least 1 mana item. Blue buff is by far the best one, but if you can't get blue buff, you really want Shojin or Adaptive. And then you just want AP items after that. Gauntlet, Nashor's is definitely fine. But if Jewel Gauntlet, then Guardbreaker is going to be preferable. So ideally, you'll have a build like this, but again, it doesn't have to be exactly this. Comp is kind of interesting because go AD or AP can mix both of them. Mixing both tends to give you better item economy, but the downside is you need to build 2 types of shred if you're kind of doing equal parts. If you're only doing primarily 1 type of damage, so let's say like we have a 2-item Ezreal and a 3-item Heimer, and let's say we hit 2-star Heimer on our 4-1 roll down, I would just prioritize Spark. If you get Last Whisper, let's say this guy's also 2-starred. If you get Last Whisper or Sun or even Shroud, it's completely fine, obviously, but I would definitely prioritize your Magic Shred in this. If it's kind of the other way around, where you maybe like maybe you only have 2 Heimer items, but have have you have 3 AD items. In this case, I might try to prioritize Armor Shred. Eventually, you're probably going to want both. You're itemizing 2. Uh, yeah, on level 8, you'll usually look for just 4 Sentinels. Normally, you play Irelia. You always play Leona for Sentinel. Rel gives you Visionary, so she's actually pretty strong, especially if you have a strong Heimer. And then Alawi will give you Rebel with this. Eventually, you do want to fit in Rumble, which means you'll have to lose one of these. Depending on how strong your Ezreal is, or how strong your Heimer is, you would usually drop either Rel or Irelia. If it's kind of like really late in the game and you're low HP, then you might not even drop anything. But in general, you do want to be playing Rumble on your board. It's a really strong unit, so you just drop Irelia. You'll lose Rebel, but getting Rumble is worth it. Then if you are playing Corki, you'll get trap as well. Yeah, prioritize itemizing Lowy with tank items. Rumble does not have a tank ability. Definitely better to itemize in these units because they'll help him. More tank stats will help him cast his damage ability more. But really want a main tank in this comp, and that's going to be Lowy, who actually has a defensive ability to scale with tank items. I mentioned this earlier, but if you hit Jace 1 and you don't have Artillerists, you can make sure you position the crystal same side as your carries. I actually like to frontline the crystal, so I would put my strongest tank over here, and then so let's say I'm itemizing Jace in this case, the level 8. So let's just say like my board looks like this. I actually would position something like this. Crystal will hit the 3-star closest units, regardless of whether it's alive or dead. It'll resummon itself and give you the attack speed bonus. So I like to put it kind of up here, so that way it can tank some damage for the rest of your team, but still give the attack speed bonus to all your main carries. That's going to wrap it up for this video on Sentinel Academy. If you have any questions, let me know in the Discord. Thanks for watching.